agencies have not bought into the idea of growing the MSME sector.
We need to understand this person called the entrepreneur and the small business person to be able to give services that can match what the person is doing.
Of the truth, an average MSME in Lagos State or in Nigeria works for the bank, and that's why we are not scaling up.
I want to collect 30 million from POI, and then you are asking me that my collateral as an MSME should be 2.5 times of that money. I think that also is not going to make an MSME to be competitive.
With the theme Driving Competitiveness via Public-Private Collaborations, the maiden edition of the National Conference on MSMEs, an annual public-private dialogue platform held in Lagos, Nigeria, and brought together key stakeholders, policymakers, organized private sector, and leaders from supporting institutions from across the ever-dynamic MSME hub in Nigeria.
As part of our culture of working in partnerships to achieve our mandate, we have used the huge benefits that are available in the public-private collaborations to organize this national conference. Essentially, the conference is to provide a more needed platform to profile ways and means of making the 39 million MSMEs competitive in the global marketplace. Competitiveness is driven by the capacity of firms within a nation to access inputs such as raw materials, finance, human resource, and a host of other inputs at competitive quality and pricing, effect value addition, processing of competitive rates, and market those outputs in a competitive manner. This is one of the reasons why we are here. So among several other challenges that most MSMEs, especially the nano and micro businesses, are faced with, is the issue of poor access to competitive markets. Several factors are responsible for this, and this is part of what should be the discourse today. Each of the challenges that can either constrain the MSMEs can be addressed by some of the enabling NDAs, and even the private sector that have been invited here. I want to take advantage of the presence of several government NDAs established to provide critical support towards creating an enabling environment for MSMEs to take up the challenge and creatively start thinking of how to solve the problem that border on their mandates.
Driven by the national policy on MSMEs, which sought to improve the MSME competitive edge for productivity and job creation, the conference provided a platform for dialogue and impact assessment for the adoption and implementation of policies and development best practices within the MSME hub in Nigeria.
To improve the competitiveness of MSMEs, there is a need for interagency collaboration across various NDAs, across different areas of government and with the various private sector actors. I think this is key. We look at various NDAs with their own specific and very important mandates, looking at food security or other areas. They of course have to fulfill the mandate. On the other hand, they provide also an issue, let's call it an issue for some of the MSMEs, and there's nothing wrong for the NDAs to fulfill both. At the end of the day, everybody will benefit. It will be a win-win situation if the MSMEs are able to proceed more quickly and fulfill the requirements better than before.
We continue to work with ministry, department, and agencies of government, both at the federal and state level. We also continue to work with the State Bureau of Statistics to ensure that the dreams and aspirations of the national policy on MSMEs, that is to run between 2021 to 2025, is well furnished with high quality data.
Without a doubt, basic laws of economics show us that, if you're not competitive, it's like you're dead on arrival, right? Except you want to start introducing subsidies which cannot be sustainable. So if you want to have a sustainable, viable business, if you want our MSMEs to actually grow like it happens in other parts of the world, we have to address the problems, the roots of those problems, address them so that they can then become sustainable businesses. They can grow and become intergenerational businesses.
Within the heart of this sector is the SME. And it's part of a key priority of our business as a bank. So meanwhile, we pride ourselves as a technological leader of financial services, which is why creating impact in society is very critical to us. And we hope that the deliberation here will go a long way in deepening the potentials or exploring the potentials of this sector.
Delivering a keynote address at the event, Otumba Bimbo Ashiru, the chairman, Odua Group, emphasized on the competitiveness in the inputs, processes and outputs of the MSMEs in the areas of value addition, value chain development, as well as a collaborative approach by the government and the private sector for effective linkages and access to information.
Nigeria has no business being an import-dependent economy. We grow, we have these things, we send them out of the country, and they are being brought back into this country. We consume what we import, which is not right. And you see, the SMEs, as a driver of the economy, if we are able to compete globally, there's no reason why we are not making efforts. In Nigeria, the export MFN's contribution is only 6.2%, less than 10%. It clearly shows that it's a failure. So we need to sit here and see how we can move forward. So globally, small and medium enterprises have played and will continue to play a pivotal role in economic growth and development. But SMEs, they are the bedrock of any economic community, and we need to see how do we help our rural builders.
To better understand and foster the adoption of the key framework for the implementation of the national policy on MSMEs, the Small and Medium Scale Enterprise Development Authority of Nigeria, Smedan, at the event, made a presentation on the major objective and priority areas of the national policy on MSME.
We are looking at issues, sectors such as agri, solid minerals, construction, manufacturing, creative industry, wholesale, and retail. The survey, the 2021 survey, MSME survey, shows that there are more people engaged in wholesale and retail business, especially women in Nigeria. But we want to see how we can positively affect this so that it can help MSMEs grow. There's a provision, or we are now trying to run on a public-private implementation platforms. Instead of the government just running or doing its own thing, we want to see how we can work very closely with the private sector so that we can jointly work or grow the MSME subsector. There's also provision for the involvement of stakeholders in the administration. We went around the whole of Nigeria, though it will be at the zonal level, but we made sure that we had all the stakeholders invited to participate in the discourse that gave birth to this national policy. Then the other initiative is that there's now a structured National Secretariat on National Policy Implementation, domiciled with Smedan. So that's going to be the coordinating center for all the activities that borders on MSMEs.
The facilitator delivered a presentation that centered on key strategic actions for the implementation of the 9 priority areas of the national MSME policy. These actions are targeted at facilitating the successful implementation of the policy. The facilitator stated that the national policy on MSMEs and the implementation framework represents an opportunity for public and private sector actors to drive the development of the Nigerian economy, create jobs, and increase forex earnings.
The MSMEs are located in the states. So while the policy talks about what can be done at the federal level, we expect that at the state level, every state should domesticate the policy and have their own portal or their own information communication channel for providing MSMEs with relevant information. Another key objective is to incorporate entrepreneurship and financial literacy training into informal education systems at the state level. At the national level, Smedan is pushing to have this, but we also expect that the states should also have this as well. Because the goal is that Smedan is basically facilitating best practice so that the states can adopt and scale. Smedan is partnering with key actors to deepen the ongoing reforms in the enterprise and product registration systems, particularly working with CAC, SON, NAFDAC, IRS. So basically, the goal here is to partner with federal and also state institutions to deepen these reforms for these interventions at the state level. That is a key goal of this conference. And to have the private sector lead in such collaborations.
A composite survey of performance of MSMEs in the fiscal year 2021 by Smedan revealed that MSMEs in Nigeria accounted for 46.3% of the GDP and 87% of employment, much similar in contribution of the sector in other economies. Since, according to a World Bank survey in 2021, MSMEs represent about 90% of businesses and more than 50% of employment worldwide, with the sector contributing up to 40% of national income in emerging economies. With the foregoing, comparative competitiveness and relative contribution of the factors of production to the output of MSMEs in Nigeria in terms of structure, access to finance, business development and extension services were the crux of the first and second panel sessions, where panelists extensively dealt with issues that comparatively leads to underperformance of MSMEs in Nigeria in correlation to development partner economies, especially in the import and export sectors.
What we do specifically for MSME access to finance is the fact that we recognize the three major issues why these SMEs are not able to access finance. The first on the category is the fact that there's lack of tangible collateral. The second is there's lack of records. A lot of them are quite small, especially those on nano and micro. And of course, the third one is even information of what is possible and what is not possible. We've actually designed products that actually fund MSMEs up to a single obligor limit of 20 million without collateral.
SMEs are in commercial business, making profit. Therefore, asking the state government to finance them directly may raise some practical questions. So maybe the best approach to look at it is that what is the nature of the funding that an SME requires? An SME may require funding to start if it's a startup. An SME requires funding to grow if it's an existing. An SME requires funding to diversify or expand if it's already existing. Now, when you have this, if the government is going to provide any support, it should be looking at the area where no commercial funding will ever be available. So there's a huge funding gap. And the way to meet it is working together of the state government, helping to start and deal with areas where commercial funding are not available, and then the commercial banks also providing whatever they need to do to ensure that the SMEs get the sufficient fund that they need to start or run their businesses.
What we do is that we take an ecosystem approach, and that we think in our own way will create the right impact as against just putting loans in the faces of the SMEs. We are targeted at SMEs, especially speaking into our heart sector of the health, education, agri, and renewable energy and transport. So we have SME portfolios in each of those sectors. If you're an SME within the health sector, we will have a support for you. And within the agri sector, there are support for you because we understand the problem, and we also design solutions that fit those problems.
Access to finance should not be taken singly. It should be taken in conjunction with other enablers to enable the small business person be able to use the money effectively and sustainably. Once you provide money for small businesses, you need to close mark them and make sure that they're able to do that. And of course, from our BDS business development service that we provide for them, we also make sure that they're using the money the way it's supposed to be used. And of course, for the matching fund, we, as of now, we're providing these facilities between 500,000 to 2.5 million to about 3 geopolitical zones at 2 states per zone. And then small businesses who are in agribusiness and agro-allied services can now apply for this loan between the amount stated. And then, of course, the interest rate is single digit, and then including the moratorium and repayment period is about 30 months, 2.5 years. And of course, we're encouraging small businesses that are qualified, like agro-allied businesses, to apply for this loan to be able to deliver further their operations. And of course, just like my DG said in his speech, that we're already gotten to almost the final level of getting a license from the CBN to establish a microfinance bank that will also be there to support small businesses have access to effective funding. And of course, we have other programs that also support small businesses in terms of access to finance. For instance, our conditional grant scheme for micro enterprises is also supporting small businesses with grants of 50,000 naira each, apart from capacity building and other areas. We also have one local government, one product program that is also supporting small businesses with access to finance in terms of providing working capital and in terms of providing grants and so on and so forth.
Our cooperative is very vibrant. We give our funds. We have a women group, and it's very vibrant. We have segmented them again into agri sector, into textile sector, into different sectors, and we make sure this year alone we've been able to get BOI funding for them, a single-digit interest rate. Almost 100 of them got funds. We've been able to get LSETF grants, which I said I was going to talk about here. We've talked a lot about funding for MSMEs, but I must tell you that many countries, they start with grants for MSME, because a small business, when they start, they're not so sure exactly how this business is going to turn out. So what you do, you support them with grants so that even when they make mistakes, they are not worrying about how to pay back a loan. So it's very important that a grant is given to them.
We should go to think beyond the conventional mode of financing. There should be other windows of financing MSMEs. I just mentioned some of them. This is very key, and there are other ones that need to be developed. So anytime we talk about financing, we should just focus on loan. Even the banks. I mentioned the issue of Jigawa State. I mentioned the issue of Kaduna State. Even the microfinance bank that Smedan want to establish, instead of talking about loan that's subject to diversion, why not look at the key things that they require? You can equally develop an equipment leasing scheme for them, and that will prevent the issue of diversion. It makes everybody happy. Okay, so you have access to the equipment, you produce, you pay back.
Impact of access to market and infrastructure in the evolving world of MSMEs and the likely ways of improvement in public and private sector collaborations in priority areas were also part of the third panel session and presentations that brought to a climax proceedings at the conference, thereby doing justice to its objective of communicating insights and perspectives to development interventions in critical areas of the economy.
There is nothing as important for a business owner as being in a room where your customers are looking for you and and you're flooded by them. And that's what we do for our beneficiaries, in the sense that if there are avenues where our beneficiaries can display their products and increase their revenue, we go that length. We are going to do that the whole of next year, to find those opportunities where business owners can get access, sometimes free of charge, sometimes highly subsidized, to be able to display their products and increase revenue.
There's no point in you continue producing when there's no market for what you are producing. But people will tell you in Nigeria that we have the population, we have the market. But if you look at it, take the samples and take the statistics, how many of those products are really produced here in Nigeria, and we are making use of that. We need to firstly have that in mind. We need to produce, we need to use what we produce and equally produce what is needed.
NASI, as an association, has taken it upon ourselves to be organizing MSME trade fairs every year. We have held 6 or 7 now. We're planning to hold, the 8th one. Aside from that, as I speak to you, our members are in the Republic of Togo, marketing, their products with the view of taking over first and foremost the West Coast, and then we extend to the remaining part of Africa in the spirit of AFTA.
We usually advocate that when you want to start a business, don't go there blindly. And there's so many ways you can get a mentor. And there's so many things that you can learn mentorship from. You can be someone you are shadowing. Okay, you could follow the profile, biography. People can read. You can actually key into a lot of the programs that are going on. And Smedan has some of them. Even a lot of projects that are going on in the developmental space also has mentorship. Even LSETF, because I'm also a mentor on the LSETF MSME program. And a lot of these programs are free. But again, information is power. So I think what we need to do more is to make this information available. Maybe in addition to some of the things we are doing, people should also learn to find information.
At Smedan, we are deepening the delivery of a business development service. And since we are talking about, competitiveness, BDS, how can public and private sector come together to use BDS platform to ensure that MSME products are competitive? What are the components of this competitiveness? One, the quality of their products, the quantity, through economy of scale, cost efficiency in operations, pricing, demand side, what solutions are they providing, suppliers, is the market there, and then the ease of doing business, the business environment. These come together to ensure that there is competitiveness, MSME competitiveness. And the private sector and the public sector have a role to play together.
In having access to market, the quality of your product counts. And the quality of a product is a function of the know-how you put into that product. It's also a function of your workspace, because there are the regulatory agencies that can stop you from penetrating the market. So in this case, it will be very good that government or individuals encourage people to invest in shared workspaces, to also encourage common facility production.
I push for access to market by one, making sure that every year we have an exhibition which exposes their products to the market. Because the MSME needs to have the product exposed, need people to see it, need people to assess it, need himself to be able to look at his own product and compare with another person's product and know whether he's meeting the mark. That is very important for him.
I would say technology, talent, and capital. You can get right those three things around just building the right technology environment, ensuring that there's enough access to capital, and ensuring there's enough trained talent, right? Then we will be able to solve for the broad spectrum of things that we're trying to solve for. And of those three things, I think that the one that is most important and that we're not paying the right attention to is the talent part. We understand what's going on in the market. And I can tell you that what's missing is that just having the right talent with the right skills, the right ginger to drive the right result is a big missing piece of that equation.
From my experience advising several people within the middle market, business leaders, it consistently comes up. There is always a talent gap. So you go in there, they're looking to grow their business sustainably, and then you finish with a strategy for them. It's looking fantastic, it's looking great. But then there is a recommendation in terms of people to come and drive this growth, drive this strategy, drive the execution. You often find that there is capacity gap within the SME space. There's a need for a bit of a mind shift as well for a lot of business leaders to understand that there is nothing more valuable than talent and skills within your business.
It seems that we usually like to throw away the sense that we had that worked and import new sense that does not make sense. We like to do that a lot, right? And the reason I'm saying that is, if you think about abattoirs, where slaughtering of cow, goat, and all those things, these things have worked, right? The cost of having to run your own private abattoir is way more than if you have more clean shared abattoirs. And this is from personal experience of one of our businesses, right? And then the other point she was making around clustering, that aggregation, bringing together the people, even things like logistics infrastructure, right? NIPOST, we need to go beyond just saying, oh, regulation and all of that, to say, what is the problem? What is the bottleneck in the market? And how do we create collectively a system that makes everything cheaper and better?
Wow.
I think those are the things that we need to start thinking actively about.
From GIZ, we want to say thank you for all your participation, for the different panels, quite insightful. One key thing to say before I hand over the mic is that, like someone said, I think about 2 or 3 persons, including the keynote speaker, that we should not just make this as a talk show. So we ensure that the inputs are being collected, and of course that we're able to share these inputs with you during the communique, but more importantly, that we're able to track implementation of this input. So that when we're having this next year, we'll be looking at what has been achieved from all the recommendations of this year. It will not just be about talking again, but rather about tracking progress and see what we can do better for what has been achieved. On that note, I want to say thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch. And of course, I wish you a very safe journey back to your various destination. Thank you.